Brendan, take over the floor. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed. I've got a few questions to start off with, if I may. You mentioned that the idea of a citizens' chamber monitoring the representative assembly had been tried somewhere. What are the historical examples of that? The citizens' chambers, do they represent the numbers of the individual countries? Are there more people from Germany than there are from Luxembourg? Should there be? What would be the thinking behind that?
Citizens' assemblies, not citizens' chamber.
Assemblies, yeah, yes.
Assemblies, yes.
Sorry. How are they numerically evaluated? And thirdly, could you apply this idea of consensual debating to the options which you put forward as being a better selection for the referendum on Brexit than the two choices we had? Because see, I could imagine that there would be different kinds of 60% consensus that you might get about Brexit. People who are mildly in favour, people who are mildly against. They might be the people in the centre. Or you could have another 60% consensus if you took the axis of voting and views from a different perspective. How do you decide which are the 60%, which is the actionable consensus? Those are the questions that I'd like to ask first, if I may.
The first one, when it was tried, as a citizens' chamber, I don't have any reference so far under the name of citizen chamber. I only have read that this concept of citizens directly elected has been tried. I haven't got a concrete, I don't remember exactly where it was, but as a citizen chamber, it hasn't appeared anywhere yet. But we may have a bombshell because it can suddenly appear within the European Union. Where the citizens, the delegates of citizen assemblies, where do they come from? If it is a national assembly, then obviously they come from a given nation.
But how many are there? 10 for each country, are there?
No, each country will have, I think, around 200 people in a country. And then that assembly will select, probably randomly as well, two of them to the European Union Conference Assembly.
Right, is that appropriate? That there should be two from Germany as well as...
Yes. So each country, irrespective of the size.
Is that appropriate? Is that appropriate?
Don't think so. But that's how it goes. I think a lot of the organizational matters of the conference are being tried out and agreed as the conference goes on. There has been such a strong opposition to the conference that it's very fact that it has started is a miracle. But once it has started, there is no way to stopping it, because it would have been such an outrage all over Europe. So I think the winners are the people like Guy Verhofstadt, who always supported the idea. Now, the third question regarding the 60%. So the consensual debating or poll is embedded in it is a means to an end. You arrive at a cut down number of policies, maybe 3 or 4, for a given motion. And in the end, you will be voting, once those 4 or 5 motions are there, you'll be voting to support this original motion. And that's why that 60% of majority will have to be somehow taken into account. In Taiwan, they discussed, for instance, the question of the Uber drivers not competing with the taxi drivers, which is a relatively trivial issue. However, they were spending 1.5 years on that, but they did arrive at a compromise. And that's why I'm saying that this confronting or dissenting voice is always heard and somehow included in the final formula of the Act of Parliament or something like that.
But the instance you cited in Taiwan is obviously, as you say, a very specific issue. Is the idea of consensual democracy, consensual debate, applicable to something as complicated as Brexit? I mean, shouldn't it really be decided by representative democracy? And when I say representative democracy, I don't necessarily mean people who ask themselves, how will 51% of the electorate vote? They will ask, what is my considered opinion of the interests of the country and the people that I'm elected to represent? Wouldn't that be a better way of going about Brexit than any kind of referendum?
Well, I'll be blunt here, Brendan. I would say no.
No.
I give you an example of the Irish referendum on abortion. The very fact that they debated it over 104 days, 52 weekends, gave the justification for the parliament to ratify it, ratify the act of a referendum. And when the referendum actually happened, people were so conversant in various implications of it that the referendum was won hands down, because it was so nitty-gritty debated by their representatives, randomly selected. So I think in Brexit case, exactly the same would have happened. And perhaps it may happen.
The argument that it would have been better to have more options for a Brexit referendum, neglects and ignores the political context. The political context was that of the Conservative Party at war with itself, and a way in which it thought it could resolve this war within itself was to have a Brexit referendum. And it couldn't have had, in my view, any other kind of Brexit referendum. So it may well be that that there would be a better way of going about restructuring our political culture. But I can't see any possibility of it happening in the United Kingdom under this government, or probably under any easily foreseeable government. But perhaps events will move so quickly that that we'll be looking at a different political configuration anyway in 5 years' time.
That's what it is. The pace of change is so fast. There's nothing to compare what happened even in the last decade. That you better prepare for something absolutely unexpected. And if you think about the Scotland's referendum potential and the disruption in the United Kingdom, but this is a different subject. But I would say that this kind of debating will be absolutely helpful for resolving very burning issues in countries like ours, using consensual debating, so that the people see each other's view and not are only confined to what they know.
Yes. One final question. In Ireland, because it's quite a small country, the results or the debates of the citizens' assemblies were widely publicised and widely followed. They had a great following in society. Do you think that there would be a similar following in British society, say, for a comparable assembly which had considered Brexit? I rather wonder myself.
I give a definite reply, absolutely. And the reason for that is if you think about the climate change. We may disagree with the ways that the Extinction Rebellion was operating, but what they've done in an extremely short time, they revolutionized our thinking about the environment and climate. And the same, I think, may happen with such issues like Brexit or reassembling the United Kingdom. As you know, this is my hot subject for a different day.
Yes. Okay, well, let me see if there are any questions which have come from the audience. There is a question. I'll read it out rather than ask the person to come on screen. From Robert Whitfield, the system described seems quite complex. Do you think that people will embrace this complexity and trust the outcome?
Well, my answer will be very short. Try it out. It is extremely simple. What I have shown you is the complexity behind this, but actually when you use it, it's very, very simple.
Well, I think something I'm not entirely clear about is whether say in the question of the European Parliament, the co-legislative power of these citizens' assemblies would mean that they could act as a block on the elected representatives, or would the elected representatives have the right to override these citizens' assemblies?
Yes, I was expecting that question. I don't have an answer for that because I think this is extremely important question, which would reshape democracy as we know. But I think it is absolutely unfair that we leave all the decisions to politicians, which every country we have in mind, and you can see how they behave. And my argument is that's enough is enough, that we, the citizens, should have a controlling power over what is happening in the parliament over the whole period of the parliamentary term, not just during the election. And that is my view, but well, I look forward to hearing some consenting or dissenting views on that.
Well, I'm not sure that everybody would agree that in all democratic countries, all politicians behave as badly as you imply they do.
Yes, I agree that it's relative. But we have, if we have to indicate United States and Britain as this staunch supporters or practitioners of democracy, as now the examples where democracy has failed. So that is my argument.
What about Germany? What about France? What about Spain, Italy?
Well, France has been just lucky that they don't have Marine Le Pen, and the same with Germany. I think the turn is, the tide is going backwards. So we may have the return to some much more normal democratic rules, but time is running out.
Okay, a question. Thank you very much from, who is it? From Ludimir Todorov. Can consensual debating function as a continuous process, eliminating the critical moments of campaigning and elections? Would it do so? Is it desirable that it should do so?
Well, it depends upon the environment and particular circumstances. I don't think that it can be used in every circumstances in political debates, because it depends on the number of people. If there are a few people, you probably wouldn't use it unless you want to treat it as a game. So, well, you have to apply it with reason. But I would say that when we have some hot issues, like now we will have to deal with the Scottish referendum in Britain. And now within Europe, we have to deal with the wave of populism and authoritarian regimes almost appearing within the European Union. Such debates will have to be considered as very important. And the way that we organize this, I think the most useful and the most practical is this citizens' assembly. Not the chamber, but the assembly.
Yeah. Okay. Final question before we go to the work example. Are there any countries, perhaps Ireland would be an example, but are there other countries in which these ideas are widely discussed? I think they're quite unfamiliar to a British audience.
Yes.
Are there any other countries where it's more familiar?
You'll be surprised that the United States is one of the countries where this concept of citizens' assemblies and debating in such a way as I described, not consensual debating because it is an amalgam of the Polish and what we had, but the Polish type debates or the yellow stickers debate is quite not common, but it happens in almost every state at the local level, because it can sort out so many issues very quickly and very convincingly, because everyone has a say via representatives. And I really am very hopeful that this be disseminated, not over just over other countries, but even in our country. I'm talking about Britain now, although this is a European forum that I'm talking to now, in other countries as well. So after the conference of on the future of Europe, I'm pretty certain that the Citizens' Assembly will be there as a fundamental institution for decision-making on burning issues that are pertinent in every European country right now.
Thanks very much. I think now it's time to move on to the worked example, as it were.
In order to participate in the debate, you need to register. Just enter your email address and password, whatever, and so on. So if you open your Euroagora website, right, and you see that it is in the context of what it precedes are the values and responsibilities. So you read broadly about this. It sits within the consensual democracy, and it is followed by federalism, constitution, parliament, election, president, and so on. So it's enough for you to see a broad context where citizen assemblies sit. But for this particular exercise, you would just read 3 or 4 sentences. So you go then to Polish statement 42. If anybody has logged on, then please follow me. So we are on statement 42. And then you will be faced with this particular statement. Citizens' assemblies should focus only on rare political issues which do not involve money, such as electoral reform, and not on fiscal issue. What I'll do, if you can't log on right now, then let me see who votes for this, and I'll vote for you. I'll vote several times for you. Who votes for this statement?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so one is unsure. Who is for it? Robert, okay, agree. All right. So now we come to this next statement. Structured debates with a random sample of citizens promise to generate a more vital, dynamic, and inclusive form of democracy than governing a country on the basis of elections run every 4 or 5 years. Now, who agrees with that statement?
I don't. I'm yet to be convinced.
So we have one disagree. Who else? As you can see, the shape is already changing. If you observe it closely. Who agrees with the statement? Lubomir. Okay. Right.
I also disagree. It's Juliet.
So we have two disagreeing. Anybody else, please?
I'm unsure.
You're unsure. Okay. So look, we have now a slightly different shape. As you can see, it is moving. Yeah. This is me. And now we have 3 groups. On your computer, if you logged on, you'll see yourself where you are within those 3 groups now.
I think the problem is that some of these statements are really ambiguous, and when you clarify them, it can mean something different to somebody else who might clarify them. So I think I prefer something more precise to be able to make an informed decision, really.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. But that's the nature of a debate, that people are not precise. So you can then put your own statement. Citizen Assembly should have a role that is relevant to a particular level of government. And we submit that. Well, but this is, I would repeat that this is the nature of almost every debate, that people have imprecise views, they don't understand the issues, they formulate what they want to say not adequately for others to understand. And that's why you have a principle of revoting, so people can vote again, or when they are thinking. The Citizen Assembly is more, this is the last statement, Citizen Assembly is more representative than electoral system. So this is essentially the repeat of the original statement. Who is for it?
I'm unsure, because it depends how you define representative.
All right, you are making it difficult, Brendan.
No, I'm not. I'm really not.
No, it's true. This is true that you are right. Yeah. So that's why we would have another statement. You would put another statement.
Yeah.
So that's how the statements build up. And people, when they consider the new statements, after a while, they build much better knowledge of what the subject matter is, and they come to a conclusion which is perhaps more rational.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let me then show you where we are now. The group, let's just, because this is an exercise, the group that dominates is B3. There are 13 people voting for it. So I'll generate a report now, which will show you what you have done. So 26 people voted, 21 people were grouped, and so on and so on. As we go to majority, as you can see, we have an overall agreement on statement 2, 10, and 12, all agree with, say, we need to devise new ways of much deeper engagement of citizens in making political decisions, 76%. Citizens' assemblies should have a role that is relevant to a particular level of government. Somebody has added it, so it made it 80% support. And citizens' assembly should have a right of initiative to call for a debate before a final decision is made on an important issue. Again, somebody has added it. Again, it's gained 80% support. So when we summarize this, the main statement has 5 sub-statements made by participants, 3 of which, the green ones, agree. 2 of them, statement number 3, is inconclusive, and this one is just 50%. So when we go to graphs, when you get all these people together, you can see where they sit. And if I click on statement 13, then it will appear here what it is, how many people voted, and how they voted. Group A, 80%, sorry, 8 people voted 100%, 13 people supported just 33%, and so on. So these are all the statements that have been put forward and how the people have voted. So in normal circumstances, in the real environment, all these statements will be taken for, if you like, debating the final resolution, because you will see how many people, what is the percentage of the people that would agree with the main motion or disagree, and why. Right. Brendan, shall we end up with the question and answer session just coming to an end?
I don't think there are any further questions from anybody. The unresolved question is the institutional one, isn't it? I can see this is a very powerful and fascinating tool for a more sophisticated analysis of what groups of people think about propositions. But then there's the question of what people, the decision makers, do with this information. How far are they bound by it? How far is it something that they have to take into account? And I think you rightly said that that's not something that you have a definitive view on, as I understood it. But I think that it will be important to come to a definitive view on that, whether we're talking about consultative mechanisms or decisive mechanisms. My own view is that we will still need to remain, even in 5 years' time, in the world of representative democracy, as I understand it, which is people who are elected by the electorate to take decisions on their behalf. Not all decisions on their behalf, but some decisions which need to be taken not on a consultative but an executive basis. And so do you have any further thoughts that you'd like to leave us with about the relationship between consultation and executive decision? Because I think that's the unresolved issue.
I mean, this is an excellent summary, Brendan. Obviously, I have my own views how I should proceed, but the problem is how real certain propositions are. We will be forced to jump on something like this because there is no other option, or are we going to be lucky enough to have some time to ponder on it and then implement such or similar solutions at the proper time? In general terms, I think Citizens' Assembly is really one of the tools that would protect us against very severe social protests, because this would enable to vent out dissatisfaction by showing to the whole society, look, these people that have been randomly selected, like you and I, they have come up with this kind of motion. So do respect it. There's no other way, because if they are properly randomly selected, they represent the whole nation. And this is what an average man in the street, like in the jury service, think. And Parliament, please do take this into account. Now, to answer your second question, which is more difficult, is how the institution should incorporate the Citizens' Assembly in the decision making, and which type of decisions should be leveled at the Citizens' Assembly, or which should be left to the Parliament. In my view, one of the ways, not the only one, is the system of petitions. But petitions, not like they are being dealt in our country, that when, for instance, there is say 100,000 people proposing something to the Parliament, by default, a Citizens' Assembly is being called, and if the Citizens' Assembly comes to a conclusion, yes, that should be taken as like a white paper by the Parliament, that's what should happen. So it is doable, but I think the main problem we are facing here, that the politicians will be very, very unkind to any such proposal, because turkeys don't vote for Christmas. They will try to keep. And that's where we are at the moment. And perhaps that's even more important. The Citizens' Assemblies take larger stake in the running of the country, that indirectly, obviously. So that would be my broad reply to your statement, Brendan.
Thank you very much. I think we've all learned a lot, and we'll no doubt learn more as time goes on, because it may well be that you're pointing towards the future, Tony, that the sort of things you're talking common currency in 2 or 3 years' time, and even people like me will be able to get their heads around the technology. But just two final thoughts, if I may. it doesn't make any difference the Turkeys vote for Christmas or not. Christmas still comes along and they're the victims of it. So it's always struck me as rather an odd thing to say. Perhaps the politicians will have no choice. And secondly, I know that the conventional wisdom is that the jury system is an excellent system. But I've been on British juries, and it is not as reassuring an experience as you might like to believe. A very cynical other member of the jury said, random juries generate random verdicts. And I'm afraid I would suggest being a little more careful when you reply to the jury system, because it's not a flawless system by any means. And your hope would be, I think, that the numbers involved in your system will be greater than the 12 good men and true. I should apologize to Monica now. Of course, it's good men and women and true. So I don't want to be criticized for that. But anything else you want to say in conclusion?
Yeah, just on that very subject of randomness and how the jury system works. I was also on the jury and remember the experience. And it wasn't the most pleasant experience, to say the least. For the sheer fact that, first of all, the people on the jury were not very much interested in the subject. They just watched the watch when they can go home. And that's why I say the random verdicts of juries will give a random result. But the problem is not legal, it's a philosophical one. Because we are not perfect as human beings, and none of the decision is perfect. But the jury system, which I at some stage really it wasn't on my favorites list. I still think that they represent an average man in the street. Otherwise, we wouldn't have an election. Election is exactly about that. An average man in the street has the right to go to the ballot box and express his opinion. And the same is with the jury system. The opinion may be wrong, but since they represent the whole country in the terms of citizens' assembly, the country may be wrong. And the countries are wrong, like with Brexit. Sorry to say that, to be so expressive, but that's what I would conclude.
Good. We could continue this conversation indefinitely.
That's the whole point.
You've said things about the jury system, which I wouldn't necessarily agree and don't necessarily correspond to my own experience, but let's talk about it at some other occasion. Well, thank you very much indeed. You've given us a lot to think about, and perhaps we're more expert in the sense that we're as confused as before, but with a greater level of knowledge. So thank you very much indeed, Tony. Thank you to everyone. And I think I'll close the meeting here, or ask Tom to close.
Yes, I would also just want to express my gratitude to both of you, to Brendan Donnelly, Tony Chernetsky, to everyone present here. I think very much what we do here today is because we're in some way we're on a quest. We're on a quest how to improve participation, how to improve democracy. And I think that it here in the participation shows that it's still very much an ongoing process, but that there's very good and important ideas out there. So I would like to invite every one of you to keep on continuing this journey together and to keep in touch. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you.